So good morning, everyone. Welcome to the MAG 911 Oversight Team. MAG staff will now take a roll call to ensure we have a quorum present for the meeting. Please note all meeting attendees will enter muted. Phone-only attendees will need to press *6 to unmute at the beginning of the meeting, and if they are subsequently muted by the host. Please remember to mute when you are not speaking to create a positive experience for all attendees. Liz?
Thank you, Chair. I will go through the list of members. Please make sure you're unmuted and indicate if you are present when I call your agency or name. Scott Walker, Phoenix Fire.
Scott, we're here.
Tolleson Fire. Larry Hall, Buckeye PD. Michelle Potts, Chandler PD.
Michelle Potts here.
Eric Kepler, Glendale Fire.
Eric Kepler here.
John Bailey, MCSO. Chief Bailey from MCSO. Rod McDaniel, Peoria PD. Jesse Cooper, Phoenix PD.
Jesse Cooper is present.
Scottsdale PD. And Tempe PD. And we'll call again for MCSO, John Bailey or any MCSO representative. Mac, can we continue the meeting without getting an acknowledgement from MCSO?
Yeah, I think John Bailey is here. He is present. I think he's just having some mic issues.
Okay.
There's also, this is John Laughlin. I'm here, and I know we talked at the beginning of the meeting, but I didn't get called in the roll call.
Oh, so I think Chief Bailey, can you hear us? Looks like he's unmuted. Okay, we'll go ahead, Chief Walker. We do have a quorum.
All right, thank you, Liz. So quorum is now present. So the meeting of the MAG 911 Oversight Team is called to order. So the next agenda item is the call to the audience. Members of the public were asked to submit written comments related to this meeting through the MAG website. Comments may be sent at any time leading up to the meeting, but must be received at least 1 hour prior to the posted start time for the meeting. This is the opportunity for the public to comment on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction that are not on the agenda or that are on the agenda, but for discussion and not for action. Ms. Graber, have we received any public comments?
We've received no public comments, Chief Walker.
Thank you, Ms. Graber. So next item is the approval of the March 16, 2022 meeting minutes. Does any member have questions or comments on the minutes? All right, hearing none and seeing no hands, could I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Thank you, Chair. I'll go through the list of members. Please indicate how you vote when I call your name. Be sure you're unmuted when you.
I need a motion first. I need the motion first.
I'm sorry.
Verizon Wireless, your call cannot be completed as dialed. Please check the number.
Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Jesse Cooper, all motioned for approval.
Thank you, Jesse. Do I have I have a motion from Jesse Cooper. Can I have a second?
Eric Kepler, I'll second.
All right, I have a second from Eric Kepler. Is there any discussion of the motion? Hearing none, staff will now do a roll call vote.
Okay, now I'm ready. I'll go through the list. Please indicate how you vote when I call your name. Be sure you are unmuted when you respond. Scott Walker.
I approve.
Michelle Potts.
Michelle Potts approved.
Eric Kepler.
Approved.
John Bailey, John Laughlin,
Approve.
Jesse Cooper,
Approve.
calling again, John Bailey. Is there anyone I did not call? Appears the agenda has passed.
Thank you, Ms. Graber. So the next agenda item is the administrative report. Liz Graber, 911 Administrator, will provide a report on the activities and programs managed by Maricopa Region 911.
Thank you, Chief Walker. So a couple of statistics we give you at every meeting. The first one being the SENS Community Emergency Notification System, or the reverse 911 system. We've had 64 launches to date. I apologize, meaning to date, mean by the end of May. That is compared to the other years, that's running at a high rate. So could possibly have another record-breaking year on how often we use SENS. And just as a footnote, SENS has been around since 2005. So it's been a good program, and we hope.
There we go.
Text to 911, we've had 4,777 sessions that have gone throughout region wide. And once again, that's keeping us at a increasing number year after year. Still not even close to a voice text, but it's still growing. And within those amount of calls, there are really vital calls that would not have been able to get help had they not been able to send text. So it's still considered a very valuable platform for the 911 operators. FCC has been talking about 988, that's the National Hotline for Suicide, and gave a presentation on the relationship with 998 and 911. One of the questions is, as they get ready to launch 988, they are wanting to know what it looks like to have the calls routed as in 911. So just because it's a 3-digit number does not mean the infrastructure is there to route the call to the appropriate hotline, as it were. So if there was a hotline in Phoenix and they're calling 988, it doesn't necessarily mean it will route like a 911 call to the Phoenix office. They eventually want to get to that, but 911 has unique circuits that calls are directed to, and a very complex platform of circuits nationwide. So that was one of the first things they looked at. The next one is the relationship that they'll have with 988. If some question whether or not 988 should be housed with 911, I have not heard any discussion of that within Maricopa Region or the state, but some agencies think that might help keeping the communications better if 988 and 911 are housed in the same area. And then the last thing is the Corporation Commission had a workshop on 911 outages. And the link in there is a presentation the state gave on 911 statewide. I know that I want to say yesterday or Monday, the Navajo Apache area, the St. John's, it was mostly Apache County, had a problem with outages because of vandalism done to a fiber link. And I think this is my opportunity to plug once again the importance of having diverse carriers carrying 911 data and voice over it. That's one of our points of pride within the Maricopa region. We have 3 different network carriers that go into every PSAP so that if one fails, we have the ability to keep 911 going. Hopefully, when the state is gone to core services region-wide or statewide, the good folks in Apache County would at least been able to get a hold of another PSAP that would have been able to assist them to get the resources in Apache County going that way. So hopefully sooner than later. But if you're wanting to see that the presentation that the state 911 office gave to the Corporation Commission, there's the link. Chairman Walker, that's the extent. Oh, I have one more thing. I'm sorry, I didn't have a bullet point on there. We are helping the state with the service plan. The service plan is something that we're required to by administrative code to complete every year. And that's been around since 911. There's it's always due in December, and we submit the service plan each December as along with the grant. So that's how they have it bundled together. The state has asked for additional information along with the service plan questions. We are sent the questions out to the PSAPs to help us answer the new questions that the state wants information on. They are not officially added to the administrative code, but it is the hope of the state to update the administrative code and get information that they're looking for added to it. So that's more of an FYI. And that concludes my report. Did anyone have any questions for me?
Michelle Potts, Chandler. I do have a question, Liz. I was looking at the questions that were sent from the state, and I did have maybe a couple of questions. Do you know why the timeline was moved up from December to June on getting this information?
I do not. I'm not sure. I'm not sure why they changed the timeline, and they also broadened the scope of what information they're wanting from the PSAPs.
Okay, and you don't know what the information, so for example, the additional questions that were asked on this are the type of logging recorders we use, the specific resources we dispatch, like hazmat air units, when we upgraded our logging recorders, backup power, who provides our communication service, do we have a well-defined training program? So we don't have any background on what this is used for or what the plan is for it.
No information at all from the state. I did reach out to him to ask if it had been incorporated to the admin code, and that was their reply, that they are hoping to have it added on when they put forth the request to update the admin code, but they gave me no information on why they were gathering this type of information.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Graber. I apologize, I was on mute there. Any other questions for Ms. Graber? I did have a quick question on the outages that were reported to the Corporation Commission. Did that include any information from Maricopa Region 911 as well?
There have been no outages with the Maricopa region, so I'm sure that they didn't say Maricopa region hasn't had any outages. I wish they would, but no, we haven't had any outages, and that's to the well thought out network that we have, but nothing reported to the Arizona Corporation Commission on that.
Thank you. And then basically, I assume then there have been outages. I know you mentioned the one across the state in the past. I think I'm aware of some, so I assume then in comparison, obviously, Maricopa region is doing quite well if we've had no outages, and other places in the state and across the country have had outages. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
And two, on the questions that Michelle asked, is specifically about the service report. I too asked and talked to Liz about this. Some of the questions I was interested to see, and we've had discussions about that as well. So I would encourage maybe at the PSAP managers meeting, if there's other questions, to get those into Liz and they can be funneled up to the state as far as some of these questions. They did seem a little odd to me. So I've expressed that to Liz as well, to move that forward and have that communication with the state from the Phoenix perspective. My role is the Phoenix perspective. So any other questions?
Actually, this is Michelle Potts again. Liz, is there a way that we can send out what this is to this board, just so everybody has a little bit of context? I just don't know where the relevance is for an administrative code on some of this. So I think it would be good for maybe to have some context. Definitely not trying to be disagreeable here, but I think in answering these questions, it would just be nice to know the path that we're headed so we can better answer them.
Yes, Michelle, I can do that. What I'll do is I'll send the list of questions that are currently in the administrative code that we have to answer. And then I'll send the new questions as well. So you have a comparison.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on the administrator's report? All right, hearing none, see no hands. So this item is on the agenda for information only. So the next agenda item is a discussion on 911 funding and budget review. Liz Graber will lead this discussion. Liz?
Thank you, Chief Walker. So as you remember, we changed our rotation of our PSAP managers meetings to every other month because we felt like this added to the communications. But one of the big items that it helped us with is giving the PSAPs an opportunity to talk about their budget request prior to the PSAP meeting that we're voting on the budget. So this is like a preview for us. So the budget gets approved in the PSAP's August meeting. In the June meeting that we had last week, this allowed the PSAPs to do a request that made requests to give verbiage to why their justification of why they needed additional 911 workstations. So if you go to the next slide, we asked the PSAPs to give us a 6-year forecast that helps us plan. And you're looking at the draft of what we have. Anything that's listed in the very first fiscal year, in this case, fiscal year 2024, requires justification on that. Everything beyond that first fiscal year is for forecasting only, and that's just for information. There's no documentation has to be included in those additional years. So you can see under the column of fiscal year 2024, we have several upgrades. Those are highlighted in black. We have ASU, Avondale, Gilbert, Peoria, and Wickenburg slated for upgrades. And then we've had requests for logging recorders. Those are in the green, and that's a reimbursement that the state does for a portion of the logging recorder, and Apache Junction and Gilbert PD are submitting for those. And then we have anything that has to do with a move or a remodel. Those are not funded by the state, but it eats up the Maricopa resources. So we need to plan that in our annual planning. So Buckeye is moving, Gilbert is remodeling, Glendale's remodeling, Goodyear's remodeling, and Scottsdale's remodeling. So between the upgrades and the remodeling and the day-to-day maintenance, they keep us pretty busy. But the one item that they add, that this is the justification that they had to speak for, was additional workstations. So AJ, if you go to the next slide, Mag, for me, there we go. So here's a list of all the workstations that were requested for fiscal year 2024. Phoenix PD requested 10 additional. Goodyear asked for 5 additional. Mesa Fire asked for 3 additional. Scottsdale PD asked for 2 additional. and AJ asked for one, Chandler asked for one, and Wickenburg asked for one. So each of those agencies got up and spoke about why they needed the additional positions. They pretty much, most of them were doing it because of the growth in their area or the anticipated growth. So the cities are back to annexing areas, and then there've been a growth spurt in the last few years in the metro area that we know of. So these are mostly forecasting increases in calls and needs within the PSAP. The state came out last December, I want to say, with a they take all the 911 calls within the state and divide them by the 911 call taking workstations, and it comes up with an average. They use that average to show whether or not an additional position is needed. So the mark for currently, it changes about every quarter. So mark currently is 3,954 is what the state says the number of calls each position takes. If each position takes more than 3,954 calls, then you may be eligible for state funding. So of those agencies that we're looking at that passed, that requested, the only one that did not qualify is the Goodyear PD and Wickenburg. So those two did not qualify for additional positions. Phoenix, for an example, Phoenix Police Department, they're each position, their 102 positions annually take and 9,959. So they clearly meet the state's fund. One of the things that was discussed at the meeting is the Maricopa Region governance team came up with a formula that with the idea of having the region self-manage the additional workstations. So they did a much more complex formula that added in non-emergency training, PSAP size, so that the larger agencies didn't cancel out the smaller agencies. And so our goal is to go back and put all of the numbers of these PSAP requests into that formula and see what the results are prior to voting on the additional position budget in August. So that was what was the biggest discussion that we had there. We work on the budget continually, but we wanted this has been a particularly difficult area for the PSAPs. So that's why we wanted to start those discussions early in June. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions from the membership? Seeing no hands and hearing nothing, I do have a question as usual. While there may be metrics to measure when a PSAP is eligible to get an upgrade, that doesn't necessarily mean, I assume, the funding is there, because as we saw, the budget put forward by this committee was for 14 million, and we got only 10.5 million. So that does not guarantee funding for these additional positions, does it, Ms. Graber?
Well, it's hard to say. Nothing guarantees funding, but when the state gave us this measuring tool to decide if they're eligible, whether they have the money or not, whether they'll actually fund them, it remains to be seen. We don't get that idea until we submit the grant. So this will go through the MAG process. And then in December, I will begin taking the approved MAG budget and submit it to the state through the 911 grant process. They then reach out to me and let me know what of their funding was approved and what was not. For an example, fiscal year 2023, there were requests from Gilbert PD and Goodyear PD for additional positions, and they were not granted because they did not meet the state's call answer, the number of calls answered per position threshold that they had set. But Mesa PD had, so those were granted. But I truly won't know that they're guaranteed until I see what the state gives us, because they do trim monies in that area for the last year.
Okay, thank you. I think that's important, and maybe where, out of this group, we continue to look at how we leverage or, maybe put pressure on the state to increase the ratio. We know that the MAG area doesn't get the equivalent as far as 911 calls in the MAG area as far as the funding ratio for the state. So maybe need there, if the needs grow, as this region is going to grow, is one of the fastest regions in the country. These needs are going to continue to grow and may outpace the budgetary ability to support it, which ultimately degrades our service delivery. So that may be something we want to continue to watch. So thank you. All right, if there's no other questions. Oh, I have a hand up, Michelle Potts.
Liz, do you know if this model or formula is used in other states?
Michelle, I don't. I could find out, reach out to some of my peers. I know that this has been a struggle for a lot of PSAPs outside of Arizona on what is the appropriate time to add a position, because you don't want a position there collecting dust that nobody sits at. Because it's a terrible waste of resources. But to my knowledge, we have not heard of a good formula that a PSAP uses outside of Arizona. And also, I haven't heard of one where they come up with a flat number that if your per position answers that many, then you get a new position. So I'll reach out to peers and make sure that that's the case.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Right, hearing none, I see no hands. This item is on the agenda for information discussion only, so we will move on. So the next agenda item is the NG 911 Core Services Project. Liz Graber will lead this discussion. Liz?
Thank you, Chief. So in our PSAP managers meeting, we did some training for the managers and also prepared them with materials that they can go back to their PSAPs and train their folks on what will change for the PSAPs when we go to NG 911 Core Services. The other thing that we're looking at is the schedule. As I discussed before, this has been moved back to September, October timeframe for the Maricopa region, and that's because of the supply chain issues. They couldn't get some of the parts they needed for a July cutover. So we are meeting with the state and the vendor this week, my technical team and I, on discussing what the order of what PSAP will be cut when. Right now we have a temporary schedule that's just alphabetically, but we'll discuss the size. Does that play a factor? Do we start out with a smaller PSAP and then grow to the larger ones? Do we go by what equipment is in each PSAP and the level they're at? So let's say all the Viper sites, all the Vesta sites and so forth. So we're discussing that to see what would be the best for the Maricopa region. And so an adjusted schedule will be coming out for the PSAPs, and we can include this group on that as well. But nothing more to report on NG 911 services. We're just waiting to make the cutover. We are talking about alternative routing and the ability to, the increased abilities we have, what we will have. We've started out with a baseline or foundation of basic things that we want going with, but we expect that alternate routing and the attributes that we can use going forward will expand greatly as we get to know the system more. And that's where we'll start talking about backing up sites outside of the Maricopa region, a statewide COOP plan, that kind of planning. But for this initial cutover, we're going for the basics and then learning what complexity we can add to it after that's done. And that's all the report I have on NG Core Services.
Thank you, Liz. Are there any questions from the membership? Right, hearing no questions, see no hands. This item is on the agenda for information and discussion only as well. So we will move on. Are there any, now we're moving to item number 7. Are there any requests by the membership for an item on a future agenda? All right, hearing none, seeing no hands, we'll move on to item number 8. So comments from the committee. Are there any announcements from the membership for the good of the group? All right, hearing none and seeing no hands. So this does conclude our meeting. The meeting is now adjourned. The next meeting of the MAG 911 Oversight Team will be on September 14th, 2022 at 10 a.m. Thank you, everybody. This concludes the meeting.